How's the heat? I know there's like heat waves and storms going through. Is everyone holding in there all right? I'm assuming that you're on this call, so it must be okay, right? All right. So we'll go ahead. We'll get started. Looks like most of the people are in. We'll have a couple people I know that have other meetings butt up right against this. So some more might come in. If you could, and you have the ability to do so, if you could update your name with your chapter, that's helpful for the conversation to know where you're located. If you have an issue with that, just let Alicia and I know or drop it in the chat, and that works as well. So today we wanted to spend some time working through planning both your budgets and calendars for next year. We know in the fall, a lot of chapters start to work through that. They're meeting with committees, they're meeting with the boards. And so we just kind of wanted to go through that process a little bit. So for those of you who are current presidents, I'd like to ask, what have been some challenges for you going through this process the past years? Or maybe it's not a challenge. What's been successful? Maybe I should put it that way. Chris, I see you came off mute.
Well, we were at an education event earlier today, and I know we're into 2025. I am from Minnesota. I didn't change my name, but Jim Rosfeld is also on here. He's a 2025's president. But we were discussing 2025 dates, and it's important to get this chiseled out in the next couple months. But fortunately, we have a good CED and marketing person that they know that. But getting reservations at golf courses, reserving at the big hotels. So fortunately, I've had it pretty easy. I haven't had too many obstacles, but I would say before October, you kind of need to set your 2025 calendar up.
Calendar. And those calendars affect the budget, right? And so realistically, it's hard to have a good budget discussion if you don't know what you're planning to do for the year. And with that, it's also good to talk to your committees, right? So for those of you who have been through the process, how has it been working with your different committees to kind of see what their plans are, if there's certain dates with those schedules, if that's how your committees are set up? And Scott, I had seen you had come off mute earlier too, so I apologize. So if you want to say something in relation to any of these things, feel free to come off mute again too.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Thanks. Do you work with your committees when you're setting the calendars, or do you give your committees the dates of when the events are taking place? Or do you not really know what the process is?
It's a mix from our perspective. This is Scott from Northern Ohio. It's a mix of both. Obviously, the chapter president that's in play, she and I work together to, here's what we've done last year, the year before. We don't have a ton of committees, but with the groups that we do work with or do have, they're constantly, should we try this next year? Should we, instead of having a golf outing, we're going to rotate. We're going to go back to the event that we hold on one of our local cruise ships here, type of thing. So there's a lot of discussion that takes place between now and August in finalizing the calendar.
Yeah. Hannah, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, we currently just recently this year created an education committee with the Central Oregon, and then we're meeting with them this month for them to come up with like the education topics and like the calendar and things like that. And then we'll take it to like the sponsorship and then work with the board to develop further items.
And that's a really good piece to bring up, Hannah, is how sponsorship factors into play as well. So if you are making any changes to your programming or to your events, again, that factors into that budget realm, but how does that affect sponsorship? So again, all of our chapters kind of function very differently between what committees they have, again, the size of your chapter, but just making sure that while you're in this planning process and getting prepared for the next year, really realizing who are all the players in this. You know, some of our chapters have a sponsorship committee, and if you take away an event, is that sponsorship going to be reallocated somewhere else? Or how does that factor into the overall financials of the chapter? Realistically, the board, as the board and as the leaders of the board, you are responsible for making these major decisions. So I know sometimes a struggle I've heard from some of you and your peers is that the committees are very stuck, or they're making it, and the board isn't agreeing with that. And overall, the structure and the plan for the year should be coming down from the board to the committees. But don't forget to get that feedback from the committees, because they're entrenched in that. So again, just kind of want to throw that out there. Charlotte, I see you came off mute too.
Oh, you're good, Kelly. Paying attention. Yeah, so we did something new this year. We have so many great committees and volunteers. We started a volunteer committee that really works on training volunteers, getting volunteers enthusiastic about joining. And our idea was we could really build enthusiasm, and eventually a lot of those volunteers become board members. So it benefits for years and years to come. And then one of the things that we added this year, our volunteer committee let all of the committees know that not only, are you chairing a committee, but we also expect you to offer feedback for the marketing plan. So that would be, they would have an opportunity to say, hey, we've got a really active committee and this date will not work. So, take that into consideration, board of directors. Or, hey, we had these really popular sponsorships and these have not done well over the years. So instead of us kind of racking our brains, sitting down, we had one horrendous, 5-hour meeting one year to try to figure out if we wanted to increase sponsorship prices. And we were drawing from really nothing. We were going on our own memory. So having that vital feedback from the people that are in the trenches, those committee chairs, is huge. And then to have the volunteer committee, work on collecting all of that information. So everyone's kind of being held accountable. I'm pretty excited to now sit down at strategic planning and actually have something to chew on as opposed to, scratching our heads. So we're becoming more and more organized in that way.
And I think you bring up a great point. It's everyone's kind of got that hand in the pot, right? So it's not feeling the pressure on just the board or on you as the leaders of the organization to be making some of these decisions or coming up with new ideas or figuring this out. And I think the other really good thing that you brought up, Charlotte, was you had these conversations before strategic planning. And so I think that's really important too, is to get some of the feedback from these core volunteers and these core operations within the chapter going into strategic planning, so you can really have those deeper discussions. Now, I know a lot do strategic planning in the fall, some do it in the spring, but I think all of that filters in that even if you're not talking about the calendar or the budget, to really get that feedback from those core volunteers coming into the organization. So great feedback there. Anybody else have any questions about how to get your calendar ready for 2025? I feel like this is a great group that has a ton of information and experience with kind of planning those calendars. So does anyone have any questions on how to implement that in their chapter? No?
I'd actually just want to make a comment on this, and I want to show my appreciation to a lot of the people that are in the room today. Mandy and I attended national and were able to sit with other chapters that are similar size. And we very much realized what our CED has been alluding to, and that is for our size chapter, we have a lot of events and we have one CED. We don't have any other even part-time employees. And so our volunteers are working harder than ever. Our CED is getting burnt out, and it's only his first year. And I don't want to put words in his mouth. He's amazing, but I worry that he'll get burnt out, I should say. And so it was really eye-opening for us that, you know what, I think we need to scale back a little bit. And with that came an opportunity to also be transparent. So one of the areas that we want to scale back is frankly a particularly difficult committee. They have our education luncheon committee for one particular area. They've kind of demanded over the years that they have 12 events just for that region. We finally got them convinced to dwindle it down to 10. And then there was a lot of back and forth on that. It honestly became kind of ugly. And this past year, we've been able to really open up communication, help them to understand why this is a large undertaking for not only our CED, but them. And they've become, completely on board to bringing it down to 5 for the year, which I think is tremendous. It's huge improvement for us, and it's going to, create better morale for everyone. But being able to have that conversation now, leading up to strategic planning, versus surprising a rather difficult committee and saying, guess what, we're taking away half of your luncheons, has been super, super helpful. So I'm all about this year transparency and really being proactive.
That's great. And we've got some resources. I'll ask Emily or Alicia if you don't mind dropping in. We have a chapter self-evaluation, and this is built so that you can either use it as a whole or piece it out. And one of the sections is evaluating your programs and being able to take a look at everything that you're doing, and seeing if they still make sense to move forward with all of them. So that's one resource that we have, and that's something that either your CED, your programs committees can do. Again, it's a very simple form. So we've got that as a resource for you to use. Also, our team, I know Crystal's coming out for the Bay Area and is going to work through this a little bit. But a review of your programs and discussion about that. So we can be that resource too, that if you need more of that brain think around it, we can definitely come and help support that discussion, whether that's a part of strategic planning or something separate. We definitely can also offer that to you as well. So but I think you bring up a great point, is just because you're doing things doesn't mean you need to continue to do them. And I know between rising inflation rates, people just being more conscious about where money is being spent. And then also because of that, the expenses the chapters are feeling with all of the price increases from AV to food and beverage to travel costs to get to the venues. Again, all of those should be considered when you're looking at that calendar and your budgets for the year as well. Thank you, Emily. So in the chat, you'll see that file for you. It's also in the toolkit as well. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to anyone here. That's a part of the chapter relations team with that. All right. Anything else around calendar planning that has been successful for you going into next year, especially for those president-elects that might be going through this for the first time? Go ahead.
I can just add some of my comments on the event planning side. And my name is Greg Crum. I'll be the president next year of the Nevada chapter. So we've got one state chapter, the Nevada chapter. We have two very different regions. We have Southern Nevada and we have Northern Nevada, right? And there's oftentimes a lot of different opinions and interests and goals, so that can be a little bit challenging. But the way our calendar typically works, for example, we had our board meeting yesterday, and we've already got our calendar for 2025 pretty much set out, and that's kind of been the way that it's operated for a number of years now. We have our monthly luncheons. We have some of our annual signature events like our trade show days. We have a large golf event. We have our gala awards. So all that stuff kind of gets plugged in automatically. And then our committees throughout the year in preparation of those things, we'll do the work to organize, market, gather resources, whatever. And then through the years, during the year, we may add smaller events, if we think that it can be profitable and well attended. So we'll add some things in as the year goes along. But for the most part, the way our chapter works has been really nice. And we have quite a few events too. We have most of our events already sort of plugged into the calendar, the year before. So it makes it a little bit, if you can do that, it makes it a little bit easier, obviously. And you just make the arrangements for resources and those kinds of things. So it's worked pretty well so far. We've got our calendar for the most part set for 2025. We'll probably add a few things, make a few tweaks here and there. But otherwise, it's our 2025 calendar is looking pretty good right now. And I'll be president next year, so that's when I'll be taking the reins, I guess. So.
Great. Well, thank you for that feedback. So with the calendar, that feeds really heavily into your budgeting process. So have any of you started that budgeting process with the chapter for next year? Not
we
really
have on
yet.
our
Okay.
side, so we're still trying to reconcile some numbers from earlier in the year, but we've kind of already pretty well into that process and working with our CPA, and so far we've got pretty much a skeleton budget that we think is going to be pretty accurate so far. So that's where we're at on it.
Great. Is there anything for those presidents, or even if you've been involved in the budgeting process prior, that you wish you would have known about going into the budgeting meeting? No, you all feel pretty.
I mean,
Go ahead, Charlotte.
I think again for us, it was collecting feedback from each committee chair or chairs. This is the first time that we're going to, dive into budget conversations with that really valuable information. And I would say just going back in time to previous budget meetings where we didn't have that. I think that there ended up being, some hurt feelings too, when we made changes without getting feedback, and people were surprised or irritated, and I get that. So I think just collecting all the information you can up front from the people that are in the trenches will be huge for us this year. Typically, our treasurer and our CED will sit down and take, they're going to take that information. They're going to take information from me, the current president, and then put together a suggested budget so that we have something to talk about too. I'm not a fan, and I sit on several different boards, not just, my local chapter. I'm not a fan of sitting down with, 12, 15 people and hashing out a budget. I like to have something to work with, and then we can kind of draw from like, hey, I agree, I disagree, and make some changes from there. That's super helpful. We also have an amazing treasurer this year that's super organized and in tune with everything. And typically what she brings to the table, there's not a whole lot of controversy around because it just makes sense.
Yeah. And you bring up a great fact. I've seen meetings around budgets be very successful when it's coming in, when it's already been looked at by a few of the key players. So again, your CED, your treasurer, if you have an accountant, absolutely you want them to be a part of that mix, and your president-elect, because again, this is going to be their year. So if there is an initiative that they're trying to bring forward or anything like that, you want to make sure that there's financial assistance, because I've seen the budget and the programming and those initiatives fail when they're not thought about during the process. So making sure those players are involved and any of those answers are answered previous to that budget meeting. Because otherwise, again, it's going to be that 5-hour meeting, and that's never a fun meeting for anyone when you're sitting there for 5 hours looking at numbers. I love Excel spreadsheets and I love the financial aspect, but I don't know if I could sit there for 5 hours and hash out some of those pieces. I do recommend that with your calendar of events, especially during this time, that you're making sure you're not just doing the same price point. So again, we're seeing a lot of venues are raising prices for both food and beverage, AV, service charges. So even if it's a venue that you've used year over year or a same facility, please verify those what they're expecting the pricing to be, or if there is going to be an increase. If for some reason you can't get that, definitely take a look at the consumer index and see maybe what that rate is. Right now, it's ranging anywhere from, I think, about 2.5% to 8% per year. Over the course of the past 10 years, it's raised almost 30%. So again, that's a huge increase. But so even if you say, okay, our expenses worth this, we're going to budget for a 5% increase. Make sure you're taking a look at that, because we are seeing that trend. And this past year specifically, I've seen some issues with that because that wasn't factored into the budgeting process. All right. I'll stop talking. I'll turn it over to the group a little bit. So that's really what we just wanted to discuss around the calendar of events and budgeting with you all. And if you haven't started that process, I highly recommend that you start that soon, because again, I know we're only in July, but the end of the year is going to come really fast, and you want to make sure that this isn't an afterthought or a last minute type of project that the board is looking at. So with that, I'd like to open it up to all of you if you have any questions for the group today. Go ahead.
I have a question about budgeting.
Yes.
And because I don't want to like make it too complicated. And so what I want to know is, do those of you who have been on the board a while, how detailed are your budgets? I mean, I'm definitely thinking I want to see last year's budget and actuals, and then what we plan for this year's budget. But do you separate it out by each event, or is it social events? This is the budget. Educational events, this is the budget. Or do you do it by each educational event? How are you doing that?
We separate it out by every event.
I see a lot of head nods to that. Does anyone do a grouping budget? I don't see that. So it looks like overall they're looking at it from each individual.
And really that helps us make our decisions too. Over the years, we have, decided to get rid of certain events when we saw, all right, there's a good 2 years now where we're not profiting. I think that our mentality was like, okay, if it was a one-off and just a 1-year thing that we just broke even or didn't quite make profit, maybe it was just a 1-year thing. But it's much easier to track if it's a pattern, if we're constantly looking at, each individual event. We've also kind of revamped certain events, seeing that they were starting to dwindle, and like, okay, we need to make this one more exciting. How can we revamp it rather than get rid of it altogether? So that's been really helpful for us to have it broken down and have those really meaningful conversations around each individual. And frankly, even our education, which is very robust. I mean, we have many educational luncheons in several different regions throughout Northern California. And there were some regions that are just more popular than others, more densely populated with our managers, and some that are more densely populated with board members and homeowner leaders, and then some that have just fizzled. They didn't do well, and we were able to go in and say, let's move this region or get rid of it altogether. So it has been helpful. More work for our treasurer and more line items to read, but more helpful conversation around it.
Chris, I see you came off mute too.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that we have an Excel spreadsheet with 9 different tabs that all feed into one, because we have 9 committees. We need to make sure every committee is funding itself through sponsorships. We are, I guess, a little bit different with the LAC committee. We do fund that one from our main sponsorships. But if anything comes up that's not making sense, the CED or the board liaison will bring it up at the committee level, but really the committees are kind of they operate very efficiently for us. So we're happy with it.
Great. Greg, I see you were
Does-
off mute for a
does
little bit.
Do your
Oh, go ahead.
committees show,
Yeah,
do you have your committees do a budget for their year?
If they want to change it, they need to request it through the board liaison or the CED. So we have changed it depending on, you know, what their needs are for education, so on and so forth.
Okay.
Greg, go ahead.
yeah, I was just kind of back up what Charlotte was saying earlier about the budgeting and breaking basically each event down, not just for budget purposes, but also tells you, as she was mentioning, which events are popular and which ones are not, you know, which ones make money and which ones don't. And that becomes helpful information for setting your calendars for the future year. So we know all of our events that are going to make money, when they're going to happen, who's going to be there, what sponsorships we're going to sell there. So it makes it really easy in that respect to set up your calendar for next year. But you do that based on in a lot of ways, that budget feedback you get, you know, how much money is this costing? How much money we bring in? How many sponsorships are we selling? Are people attending it? You know, is it worth the effort? That kind of stuff. So that's why it's good to evaluate, and not just for putting together a budget, but also identifying sort of where the, you know, where your efforts should go, you know, in terms of bang for your buck. So, I just kind of want to add to that, to what Charlotte was saying. So.
Yeah, and Greg, you bring up a really good point. You know, there's some costs that you don't see in the budget, including volunteer time, other resources, including marketing efforts that might be, you know, email blasts, social media posts, things like that, and your time of your staff. You know, if they're focusing on only planning events, they're not having time to spend, you know, working with the members and engaging with them or helping the recruitment efforts if they're just being that, you know, churn and burn event manager. And I know that's hard sometimes when you only have a single staff or a part-time staff. You know, we do have some chapters that are lucky enough to have multiple staff, but in those regards, that's also something to think about, that you're not seeing a financial dollar amount sometimes put towards. And you don't want to also burn out your volunteers as well. Like a few of you have said, a lot of your committees, they're coming up to move into the board level. Well, if they're burnt out at the committee level, they might think, hey, if I can barely function at the committee level, there's no way I can function at the board level. And so just think about those factors too when you're evaluating, is how much time is being put into that that's not showing on some of these spreadsheets as well. I also forgot one other resource that we do have if you need it and you're having a discussion around programming or a lot of other chapter operations. In 2022, we did a very intensive survey with our chapters, and we got a great response. All but one participated in the survey, and it was about 200 questions. So it was very robust. But one of them really focused, or one of the areas focused around programming and how many programming the chapter we're doing, the percentage of all the different membership types that were attending the different types of programming. So if you are having a discussion around that and you want to see either regionally or chapter size, how you might relate to some of those chapters, just please reach out to me. I can get you that information and that data for that relevance of that discussion. Again, if you're discussing other things too, like your publications, let me know. Again, I know that was from 2 years ago, but again, I think it's very relevant to a lot of the discussions that your chapter might be having. And we plan to do that every few years so that we can stay relevant with that statistic for you. All right. Thanks for that question, Nomi. All right. What else does everyone have for the group? Everyone's chugging along. They're doing good.
I wondered if, so we do our marketing plan. So, you know, we plan our calendar and then that all goes into our marketing plan. And it's not like a live document where, you know, sometimes if you're signing up for like a trade show or something where it's live, you select booth 100 and then the next person knows booth 100 is no longer available, right? So that's not how our marketing plan works. Like it's all time stamped. So the business partners fill it out, send it in, but then you may not know that you didn't get that sponsorship until later when the ED finally has time to review it. So I wondered if any other chapters are doing a live marketing plan.
And when you're saying marketing plan, because I know some chapters call different things, you know, different names, are you
Yeah.
talking about your sponsorship availability marketing plan? Okay, so for
Correct.
the
Yeah, so
sponsorships and when it's opening up to sell and everything like that.
exactly.
Does anyone have feedback around that of how you're selling your sponsorships and making sure to be transparent and for the sponsors to know what's available? I will say that from my experience working with some of the chapters, they're utilizing their database system. So again, they turn it on and they say, you know, at 3 p.m. it will be turned on. And a lot of those systems, they can put in a quantity. And so if there's only 3 available, once that one's available, it's showing sold out within their system. So it's doing it that way versus like a paper form or an email to send it in. So I've seen a couple of chapters doing it that way. Go ahead, Sally.
Yeah, here we just have a SharePoint site for the whole board to use, and so all of the documents, like where the admin would track sponsorships that have come in, they're updated live in that document. So if a board member wants to see what sponsorships are in, they can just log into the SharePoint site and open that document, and they'll see whatever's been entered. Now that does rely on the ED to enter them promptly, but we don't have to worry about them selling out yet. So we're okay.
Yeah, because ours, like our marketing plan goes live and there's like a few sponsorships that, I mean, go so quickly, right? And then, but you're right, it's reliant on somebody actually putting in that data and then, you know, looking at it and then getting back to those other sponsors that wanted that same sponsorship that's no longer available. And so it's a lot of back and forth. And then as a business partner myself, you know, I find that challenging because, you know, if you know that one particular sponsorship's not available, well, then you look to see what is. But if you don't know for like a week, then those other ones are taken as well. So I would love to have it live. And so, yeah, Kelly, we have, you know, our internal system that we use for events. And if it's one particular event that's listed with the sponsorships, then we can do that. I just don't know if we can do it for such
With an
a large,
overarching
yeah, for such a
piece of it.
large thing. So I wondered if there was a software out there that people were using to do that.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on your database. I'm sure there are some softwares around that. And this might be a good discussion. Usually, at least once a year, we have a sponsorship discussion outside of the water cooler style calls like we are here today. So we'll take a look at the calendar and see if we can get that in play, and we'll make sure that this is a part of it. Of how are you how are you selling the sponsorships? Maybe it's not just the items, but selling it and being fair at all the different levels and what people are using to do that. Yep, so Carl said their system is Wild Apricot, and so they can use a store feature for that. So it's not just event style based with it. And I know, again, depending on your database, you might have an option like that.
I belong to 3 chapters and I've seen different types of sponsorship, and I'm a business partner. One chapter, they group things. So you can be an education sponsor. So every education event, you pay your sponsorship beginning of the year, you're a sponsor for all of them. They have social sponsor a year for all of them. And then they have the diamond, platinum, all those as well. Then other chapters do, when an event comes up, here's our sponsorships, what do you want to do? And I really don't know what's better. I mean, for me, probably budget-wise, I'd rather at the beginning of the year sponsor what I'm going to sponsor and know what I'm paying for my, you know, marketing for the year. But I don't know if that's good for everyone else. Has anybody found that one way works better than the other, or you get you've used both and you thought one worked better and you got more sponsorships?
Well, we kind of do both because we do have that marketing plan. And so again, as a business partner, I love that I can have my budget set for the company and what I'm going to spend throughout the whole year for this one chapter because I'm involved with several other trade organizations. And so, and then also for the chapter and like our budget as we're doing it for these events, we know we've already sold this many sponsorships before it's even gone live. But then there are companies that don't participate in that. So the sponsorships that didn't sell, that event actually goes live, and then you can do it as, you know, as the event has come up. So we kind of do it both ways.
Yeah, I've also seen a couple chapters starting to offer what's called like flex dollars. So if you buy one of the main levels, let's say it's platinum, gold, diamond, whatever you want to call them, they have stipend dollars that can be used for different things. And that can range from registration fees for additional people to attend events to if we add an event, you can push that money into that. You know, if there's something that's not picked up and you want to use that flex dollars to, you know, sponsor another item, you can do it that way. But that way they're getting in that bulk money at the beginning of the year. And so the business partners are able to kind of already put that into their budgets or get it off their books. But then as if the chapter is adding something, they have that money that they can spend throughout the year. So that might be something too, that if you're with a chapter that maybe you don't have all of your events finalized, and that's usually when I'm seeing people are adding in like, oh, okay, we have this event coming up. It's because they didn't have it contracted and finalized completely for the beginning of the year. That would be a way to offer that money to go towards that event as well.
One
As
of the
just
things
another option.
one of the things I would say with your marketing plans too is to be sure that what you're offering is trackable. Because I've seen chapters promise a lot of different things, and it's a real huge nightmare to track. And so really have a conversation with your chapter executive director as you're planning what those marketing plans look like to see if you do have the technology in place. One, to be able to track it because that makes their job so much easier. And it also ensures that you are able to track that people have received their benefit. So I would just give that one, especially being a CED before and having to track member benefits, it can be very difficult if you don't have a process in place to do it.
For those on the call, do you have groupings or are you usually doing more a la carte style sponsorships?
We have association sponsorships and we have, so you can just sponsor the association for the year. And then in that your name appears under various categories. So some at some events and some at the AGM and some in eBlast. And then we also have specific conference sponsors and then luncheon sponsors. So a variety.
A mixture. Right.
Yeah, with ours, we, you know, each event is separated. And then what's cool about doing our marketing plan is we have something called a sustaining sponsor. So it is like supporting the chapter, but it's nice because for a business partner, instead of doing it, you know, as the event goes live, you've already allocated those dollars for the year, but then you qualify for a certain level depending on how much you spend with the chapter for that year. So it's either, you know, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and then you get extra perks. So I'm thinking, Sally, kind of like the way you do it is how some of the other organizations locally do it, where you're like, I'm just going to buy a platinum sponsor. It's whatever, $5,000. And with that, I get these things. So ours is a little different. You actually get rewarded for spending money with the chapter in advance. You automatically qualify for that level and it comes with those perks. And then you're highlighted throughout the year. And then depending on the level that you qualify for, you also get a discount on the events you're sponsoring for the year. So like if you're a platinum sponsor, you actually, you're spending $10,000 with the chapter, but you get 10% off all the events you're going to sponsor. So it behooves you to do it in advance. And then one, you know what you're going to be sponsoring that year, you lock it in and you get that discount, and then you get all the little perks with it. So we found that to be really beneficial and really unique.
That's great. Does anyone else offer a unique sponsorship option, whether it's a package or something very specific that's been successful that might work with other chapters? All right. Well, we'll add that to the list too for that sponsorship discussion, because I know there's a couple of chapters that aren't on this call today that do offer some very unique options to the members, but I don't know all the logistics, so I don't want to throw it out there and speak wrongly about those.
I was going to say, I asked about sponsorship on this meeting and a few people sent me stuff and I was like, pie in the face sponsorship and cornhole sponsor. These are things that I have never even heard of in my life. But anyways.
Yeah. And I know one chapter has started, it's sponsor the CED shirt. And so they will wear your logo on their shirt for the event. And so as they're walking around, your logo's on their t-shirt. So again, just little things that you might not think are a big deal. But again, people are picking it up and they're enjoying it. And, you know, social media is loving it, that they're seeing them in different shirts and the different logos and things like that. Emily, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was talking to a chapter the other day that said, why are we just having sponsorships to have sponsorship? And I thought, well, if they're paying for it and they're loving it, why not? You know, add those sponsorships. So.
Absolutely. All right. What other questions do you guys have for the group? For the presidents on the call, you're halfway through your year. How are you feeling? How are you feeling that the first half has gone this year?
I mean, I think it's wild. It's going fast. I guess I anticipated that would happen. I've been on the board for some time now. And you know, every year kind of works that way, right? You do all of the strategic planning. You're so nervous to dive into the new year, and then before you know it, it's over. So you know, we in our chapter, we had a weird year. You know, we transitioned to a new CED. And so I feel like our year might have gone even faster because we were putting so much work into getting him on board. And now that he is on board and he's kind of smooth sailing, and you know, I feel a little useless at this point because we put so much work up front. Which I guess is a good thing. It means, you know, we're more drama free right now than we have been in quite a few years. So
that's great to hear. Always less drama is always a good feeling. Just like
Agreed.
Emily said, it's such a good feeling to have.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Anyone else? How are you feeling with the first half of the year gone? Is there anything that you feel you wish you had going into your presidency at this point, that you could have been more prepared with, or you just would have liked that knowledge? And maybe think on that for.
I don't, you know, instead I'm going to twist it and make it a positive. Something I'm really thankful for is when I was president-elect, I was in every meeting. I was invited to be a part of every conversation. My president at the time did not shy away from involving me. Sometimes, you know, it felt a little overwhelming and stressful because, again, our chapter was dealing with some, you know, kind of off stuff and hiring a new CED. But I'm really thankful for being kept in the loop. You know, with Mandy being our president-elect, and she's already been a president, she has more knowledge than even I do, but she's very much a part of all of our conversations as well. So, you know, I don't know that it's necessarily always intentional to do that, but I'm so appreciative that I didn't, you know, get thrown into the lion's den without understanding how this all worked. I had a real clear understanding of what the presidential role would look like. So I can't think of anything I didn't have, you know, I can only think of the opportunities I was given, and I'm appreciative.
Yeah. And that's great feedback because you almost get to see behind the curtain, right, of what's happening, being involved. You're not surprised with anything in the future. So for those of you who are president-elects, if you aren't involved in those conversations or a part of the meetings that are going on, talk with your president, talk with your chapter executive director, and start to get involved in those so that there isn't anything of surprise, later in the year or that first half of the year that you didn't know about. That was your responsibility to talk at the annual meeting. And again, making that time to be a part of those conversations. I know sometimes that's the hardest thing to find is time to do all of these things and to volunteer. But really it's to prepare you and to make sure that you're ready to serve in this role. So thank you for sharing that, Charlotte. I think that's really important to start early of it being in those conversations than later on and not having any idea what's going on. All right. We've got a few minutes left. I want to just make sure everyone got their answers answered for them today. If you want to come off mute and ask something to the group, go ahead. I'm just going to give a couple quick updates about a couple of things while I've got you all here today. For budgeting purposes, within the next few weeks, we will be sending something out to your CEDs with just some verification of items. So one of the biggest changes that has been happening over the course of the past few years is our rebate percentages that for membership that go back to the chapters. So in 2025, all categories except for the national corporate members, because that is a standard fee regardless, will be 40%. So the past 5 years, we've been working on that. They used to be all different percentages all across the board, and it was hard to calculate. So that will be moving to 40%. We also still plan on offering some benefits such as Zoom accounts for all of our chapters. So that's going to continue. There's also membership in the ASAE Association for your chapter staff. That's great for them to have professional development and a pulse on what's going on in the industry of nonprofit associations. So we will send over that information to all of them to help prepare for the budgeting process. So I just wanted to update you with that. The other update I wanted to provide is in October, we are having our chapter executive director retreat. And it's very important that you give your staff time to attend this. We are hosting this actually in Tucson, Arizona. It's the first time we're not having it in the Washington, D.C. area. We decided to, every third year, move it to somewhere outside of the East Coast so that it would be a little bit easier for the travel for our West Coast chapters, so that they're not constantly the only ones traveling across the country. But it's a great time for the CEDs to meet and go into details around the operations of the chapters. So I know, for example, we talked a lot about sponsorship. That's always a huge topic that takes place at retreat, and the pieces that filter into all the different operations of the chapter. So if you have any questions about what takes place at retreat or why it's important to allow your staff time to attend that, please feel free to reach out to anyone on the chapter relations team, and we can discuss what the details are with that. Go ahead, Sally.
If a chapter can't afford to send their ED, is there any option to participate in parts of it virtually?
We do not offer a virtual option, but we do offer 2 scholarships for that.
Okay.
Currently, there has not been any applications for those scholarships. So if you
Okay.
do have a financial situation with the chapter, please feel free to have your CED reach out to me directly, because we do have those scholarships available.
Okay.
Also for the chapters that have a CED that's about a year or less, we will cover a flight up to $500 and 2 nights of hotel for your CED to come for their first year to the CED retreat. We feel it's really important that at the beginning of their term as CED, that they are able to come to this retreat, get to know their peers, and really get into the meat of some of the operations, ask their questions. So that's something that we offer for our new CEDs when they're starting with a chapter.
That's awesome. What's the date on that?
It's the 14th and 15th of October.
The new CEDs will have a short session on the 13th, the afternoon, late afternoon of the 13th. So they'll come in a little early.
Did you say where that's at on the West Coast?
It's Tucson, Arizona. All right. Well, with
Really
that,
quick, sorry, Kelly, on
yeah.
that note, I know you said that it's going to be October this year. It looks like last year it was September, and our brand new CED came on like 3 weeks prior to it happening.
Correct. Eric is, yes, Eric is
he counts as
considered new.
first
Yes.
year. Okay.
So just to verify, usually if a CED is a month or two in when retreat is happening, it's very difficult for them, one, to come because they're ingrained and just getting used to what's happening at the chapter. So usually they can't make it just because of the time restraint. And two, they don't know what questions to ask. So we usually recommend that if you're 2 months or less, that it might not make sense for you to come to retreat. We'll usually talk to the board about that and say, hey, what are your thoughts with this? If you want them there, absolutely, let's have them there. If you'd like to wait until next round, then yes, that we consider them that new CED during that next round. Yeah, just like Emily put in the chat, sometimes that just becomes too overwhelming for them. So we do like to go through kind of the onboarding process a little bit before we get them really thrown into the meat of everything. All right, well, with that, if you guys have any questions about anything, if you need anything, don't forget we've got the Exchange Network. So you can always throw a question out there to the group, or you can reach out to any of us on the chapter relations team. Thank you so much for the interactive call. Yeah, Sally, go ahead.
One quick question. When I go to that exchange, all I see is kind of like outward monthly postings. I don't see any questions from anybody. Is that because we aren't using it?
Correct.
Or because, okay.
Yes.
So there could be questions there where we were bouncing something.
Yes.
Okay, because it doesn't look that way. It just looks like some sort of outbound monthly thing.
Yes, so weekly we're posting messages with
Or weekly.
updates for you. So that's the main form of communication through the exchange. But realistically, it's just, I don't think people are throwing questions out there. They're either bringing them to just these calls or they're reaching out specifically about things. So feel free to throw out messages or celebrations too. If you guys do something really great, I know some of you have strategic planning coming up, or again, yay, we finished our budget. We are really excited that it's done, it's over. I don't have to think about it because it got approved. Feel free to throw those things out on exchange too, because it never hurts to celebrate some of those wins along the way. And these are your peers that will also enjoy celebrating with you. All right. Well, you guys have a great rest of July. We'll see you in August. And please stay dry and stay cool as possible. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.